Hello guys, welcome to a new video. Thank you for being here. Like you saw in the last video, we were just about to do the successful authentication and creating the JWT token. One thing I want to mention, maybe I didn't make clear in the last video, is that this method here, maybe you're wondering how does Spring Security do the authentication. And this is going to be done by this method, by the authentication, by the default Spring Security Authentication Manager. Calling this method, and this method is going to be calling in one of those moments. Is going to be calling this class, because this class is going to be registered later on in the configuration class that we just created in the last video. Is going to be linked to Spring Security, so it's going to be called this class. This class is going to be getting the username that we passed here, so this username is going to be used here, and we're going to create the database and see if there's a person, and then this making a new custom user detail. This is going to be passed down further down the chain by this method authenticate, and this method also in one of the other moments is going to be checking the password with the password that we put here. So this password that was in the request that triggers this authentication filter is going to be matched with this one, and if everything seems okay, then it's going to be creating a authentication object with the roles, and it's going to throw this successful authentication method. If anything goes wrong here, it's going to go to the authentication failure handler, and also this method, of course. Okay, so let's begin with creating the JWT. So the first thing we have to get is the user, and in order to get the user, we're going to be using this authentication object, and we're going to be creating a new custom user detail object, and this we have to cast it. So we're going to be using the auth result, which is the type of class authentication, and we're going to get the principal, and the principal is actually the class. You see that it's of type object, so you can cast it to this type because it's actually this class that we made here with all the information that we need. Okay, so now that we have all the information that we need, we can go and begin creating the JWT token. First, we have to check the session. So we're going to go to HTTP session class, and we're going to be using the request, and you're going to get this session. And this is for to be sure that there's no session. So if session is not null, we're going to put it null. We're going to put it empty somehow. Okay, so session dot remove attribute web attributes dot authentication exception. Okay, so if there's a session, then we're going to be removing the authentication exception, because we are in the successful authentication, so there's no authentication exception until now. Okay, so the first thing we need are the roles that we're going to be put as in the JWT token as claims. Any information extra that you put in the JWT token is called a claims. Okay, you know that the rows is coming in an array, so rows, then we're going to be using the the custom user detail. We can make this name a bit more expressive. So this is actually the authenticated person. So we can get the authenticated person, and we can get rows.jwt. And this method, in the previous video, or in the first video, I showed you that this method is going to go to string rows and then get only the names of it, and it's going to be converting it into a string array. Okay, so now that we have the rows, we're going to be making the claims for the JWT token, and the claims, as you can see, is from the library that we imported in the pom.xml, the IO.JSON web token. And this, we're going to be using the JWTs class to create the claims. So this is now a claim, and then we have a method chain in here, and we can set immediately the subject, and the subject in most cases is the username or the email or whatever that authenticates a user, so makes a user ID or and unique, for example. And here we're going to get the authenticated person, and we'll get the get username. Okay, and you're probably wondering, where is this username coming from? And this is coming from this principle, because as you can see, we don't have a username attribute here, but we do have it here. So this user is extending this class, so you can actually have the username. Okay, so that is going to be the username, and that username, you know, we pass it here, just like here. So this one we pass it here. Okay, so this is the first claims that we're going to be put. It's called an object. It's not really a claim yet, because this is like default built into the JWT token. So every token normally has a subject. Okay, so we're going to move on right now, and before we put the rows as claims, we're going to be checking if the rows is not empty, because if we put an empty array, we're going to be having problems later on when we want to see the information in the JWT token when we decode it later on in the browser as a demonstration. Okay, so it has to be more than one, otherwise you don't put it. And it makes sense also. If you don't have any rows, why are you going to put the claims with information of rows? Okay, so if it's more than 0, then we're going to use the claims object, and we're going to put a claim. So a claim has a key that you identify it with, and the value of it. It's just like a hash map in a way. Okay, so right now we're going to be using the JWT properties, and we're going to be using the name. So if you can go here, JWT properties, you can see the cookie name, and that's not the name. So the rows property name, and this is the rows property name that we're going to be using. I'm doing it this way because then when we get the JWT token later on in the cookie, we can use the same name and not make a mistake and use another name. So this is for this consistency property. You can also use a constant, it's up to you. but I'm using the JWT properties. Okay, so rows property name, and the value is the rows array. So when we're done with that one, we're going to be moving on to actually creating the token now. The token, as you know, is going to be a string token that has three parts. The first one is the head, the payload, and then the signature. Okay, so we're going to again use the class JWTS, and we're going to be use the builder to actually build this. The first one is to set the claims. You have the claims already, and then we're going to be signing it with an algorithm and a key. The signature algorithm that I'm going to be using is the HS512. You can use any algorithm, it's up to you. And we're going to be using the key that we put right in here normally, but it's up to you. Some people don't store the key in the application itself, but it uses another application or another configuration for outside the application to increase protection. But for this demo purpose, I think, and also for real life, I think you can just set it in the application, but it depends on your setup and your context, etc. Okay, and before we get the key, we're going to base 64 encode it. So we're going to be using the base 64 and get encoder method and encode this secret to a string. Encode to string, and therefore we need a byte. So first we're going to get the secret, which is a G, using the field JWT properties, and get secret. And from this we're going to get bytes, so we can transform it into a byte array. Some people just use the class without encoding it, but I encountered an exception once, that when I changed the secrets and I tried to authenticate with the previous token created with the other secret, it was still authenticating the user. So I changed the secret here, and then before I changed this, I created the token, it's in the browser, and then I changed the secret by adding more characters here, and then I tried to run the authentication method again and just try to get to a resource, and surprisingly it did. So that's why I'm going with encoding the secret to base 64. By doing it this way, we can ensure that it's not going to be anything the same. Okay, but you can also not use the base 64, it's up to you. And the last thing we have to do is compact, to make it smaller and compactor. Yeah, it's self-explanatory. Okay, so let's proceed. Right now that we have the token already generated, maybe you're thinking right now, why didn't we put the expiration date? And later on, when we create the cookie, I'm going to show you, because the cookie is going to have the expiration date, not the token. Okay, so right now we're going to create the cookie, and we're going to go to the cookie class, name it JWT cookie. I think it's the Java X servlet, not sure, but we'll get an error if it's not. and we're going to be creating a new cookie. So here, a cookie needs a name and a value, as you already know. Here we have the cookie name, which is JWT. This is also for consistency usage. So we're going to get the cookie name now, and then we're going to add the value, so the token, to the cookie. And now is one of the most important part of the cookie-based authentication, JWT cookie-based. And here we have to configure the cookie exactly this way, so we can prevent again, so we can get protection against cross-site scripting, and we make sure that this cookie expires, because if it doesn't expire, then this token is always going to be valid, and that's not really good thing. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is set HTTP only to true. The other thing is set the expiration date, so set max age, and for this purpose I'm going to be using, the time is going to be like 100 seconds, so that's 1 minute and 30 seconds. And we're going to get this from get expiration. So this get expiration here is 100 seconds. It's in seconds, right? Okay, so it's 1 minute and 40 seconds. The next thing we have to do is set the path of the cookie, and since the path is just going to be the domain, if you want to set the path for the cookie then or to another path, you can also do it here. And this is one of the most important thing also is the set secure true, so this cookie is only passed when there's a connection, when there's an HTTPS connection and not only HTTP. And this HTTP only is to set the cookie, so by setting this one we can prevent and get protection for cross-site scripting. Okay, so that's done. So the cookie, we already made the cookie. One other thing that I want to mention is that right now we're going to be setting the security context. So everything right now is good, so there was a successful authentication. So we're going to be creating security context. First we're going to be created empty, so security context folder that create empty context, and then from this context we're going to be we're going to be setting the authentication, and the authentication is the out result that we got here in the method. And then this context we're going to be set to the global security context holder set context. Okay, and the only reason that you have to do this is if after authentication you're going to be doing something that requires authentication. Otherwise you don't have to do this because it's stateless. So, and at every request it's going to check if there's a cookie with the token that we just created. So if you're not going to do anything that requires authentication after authenticating, then you don't have to set the security context here. Okay, and the last thing we have to remember to do is add the response, add the cookie to the response, the JWT cookie. Okay, and you're probably wondering why don't we just set it here right away, and the reason is if there's an exception here, then you're going to be setting the cookie to the response when there's a problem with the authentication. That's the only reason. But if you don't have this, or if you don't mind, you can just set it and copy paste it here. Okay, So that was it for the successful authentication. This is how you create your JWT token and set it in a cookie, set all the configuration of the cookie, and if you want to create cookies for different domains, you can also set it here. So set domain. Okay, so if you have different domains and you want to create this cookie for different domains, then you can set the domain and then add multiple cookies in this response. Okay, so that was it for the authentication filter. We have the success, we have the unsuccessful, we have the attempt authentication. And yeah, I forgot only one thing, that we're going to be wrapping this in the try catch. So if something goes wrong here, we can catch it and we can log it. So we're going to print the expiration, and the logged error. Okay, and we're going to be throwing the error so the authentication entry point can catch it. Okay, so we're going to throw new authentication service exception with an empty message, because the message is never used anyway in the authentication entry point class here that we're going to implement later on. Okay, so that's it for the successful authentication. I hope you understand everything. If you have any question, you can ask. And I mean any question at all. If you have suggestions is always welcome. Okay, I will see you in the next video. In the next video, we're going to be implementing the authentication entry point and the authentication failure handler, and I'm going to show you also some examples of working with this, so you can see that it's actually working. And we're going to also be configuring this authentication config file so everything can work. Okay, I will see you in the next video.